to touch on today is to remind individuals that the Delta variant continues to be a variant of concern. This means that there is evidence of increased transmissibility and more severe disease with this variant. Remember, as Commissioner stated, that your best protection is vaccination, particularly individuals who are fully vaccinated. And also, as Commissioner Johnson stated, our community remains below 50% for total vaccination rates, and we don't want to have to go backwards in terms of the progress that we've made together as a community against this illness. Use this time of low transmission to consider vaccination if you haven't already, to talk to others about it, gather information, and encourage friends and loved ones to get vaccinated. This 4th of July weekend as well is going to likely bring opportunities for gatherings and celebrations among individuals. As a pediatrician and as a parent, I want to remind all of you that children under 12 are not eligible for vaccination yet, and so they remain unvaccinated and thus more susceptible to COVID. In addition to COVID illness as a potential among children in particular, we are seeing an increase in the circulation of non-COVID respiratory illness right now, especially among children in Wisconsin. In particular, seeing rhinovirus, seasonal coronaviruses, and para-influenza illness on the rise. The southern states of our country are also seeing a rise in respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. Some everyday actions that you can take to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 can also prevent the spread of other respiratory illnesses. So those are the things that we've been talking about all through this pandemic. Washing your hands often, covering coughs and sneezes, and staying home when you're feeling ill. People who have symptoms of respiratory or other types of illness should stay home to prevent the potential spread of illness, especially those who are attending summer camps, childcare programs, those who work in or are visiting long-term care facilities where individuals are particularly vulnerable and susceptible to illness, and other settings where close contact is likely. I'm going to transition now to Darren Rausch for a review of our community's data.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parody. It's my pleasure to join today and talk to you a little bit more about the data and what we're seeing in our COVID data this week. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and highlight a couple of the key takeaways from the data this week to start, and then I'll show you a few of the data reports and graphs that we've created this week. So the key thing this week is really the same key messages we had last week. Cases continue to decrease. We continue to move even lower in terms of disease rates than we have at any point in the pandemic. And this is very, very good news. Unfortunately, on the flip side, we need to make sure that we're still doing all of the things we need to do to keep ourselves and our families healthy. Secondly, and kind of correlated with that, needing to keep people healthy, is we know that there are serious complications, hospitalizations and deaths for many of the vulnerable populations in our community. And we've seen that throughout the pandemic. And then lastly, as you've heard the previous speakers say, vaccination does remain an important strategy in mitigating the effect of COVID-19. And our rates, although they're only inching up slowly a bit every week, they continue to move in that positive direction. So when we look at our data this week, this graph is showing the new cases of COVID-19 throughout the totality of the pandemic over the last 16 months. And you see very, very few cases really for about the last month. So we're seeing those very, very flat rates, and that's very positive. This graph represents data in the entire population, so children through adults. The next graph I show here is looking at children under the age of 18. And again, there was more disease in kids back this spring, April and May, but certainly they have tailed off in the last several weeks too, with very, very low rates. One other thing that we've tracked and I like to share is deaths. And here you can see Very few deaths have been reported really since the bolus of our older, more vulnerable adults have been vaccinated. So really, the story since early March has been there have been very few deaths, averaging less than one a day throughout most of this time, but continue to underscore where we came from and the significant toll that COVID has taken on our population. And then lastly, today I want to reflect the reproductive number, the transmission rate. This is something that we've tracked very carefully throughout the pandemic because it's been indicative of spread in our community. And while I'll highlight that with very low case numbers right now, there's a bit more fluctuation in this transmission rate. It was very interesting for me to see, very, very low transmissions last week when we spoke, and now a little blip in the upward direction since last week. So we want to certainly be cognizant of that and be aware of doing all of the things we need to do to keep ourselves safe, as the other speakers have mentioned, washing our hands, covering coughs, all of those things. There are other respiratory viruses that are now circulating, which seems weird in July, but that's where we are at this point, and there's a lot of things that we can do to continue to mitigate that risk. So on the COVID front, we're doing really great. I hope we all can celebrate that win and that we're moving those vaccination rates up, but I guess we can't be complacent just yet, and we need to continue to be vigilant. So with that, I'll end my formal comments and turn the briefing back over to Catherine for the Q&A portion.
Thank you, Director Roush. And the data you just shared is a perfect segue into the first questions we're seeing from Sharon Bajenda with CBS 58. And perhaps, Director Roush, you can jump in here first. The first question is, with the low volume of COVID now in the area, is there any concern of mass spread from 4th of July gatherings and the Delta variant?
Yeah, I certainly think any sort of gathering, small family, intimate neighborhood gathering, there is a potential for spread. We know the Delta variant as proportion of cases has been increasing nationwide, has been increasing in Wisconsin. So certainly, I think all of those preventive measures are still very, very important.
And I'm not sure if you have this information in front of you right now, otherwise we can circle back with Sharon following the briefing. The second question is, what were the average daily cases in Milwaukee County for the 4th of July 2020 compared to what it is now?
Yeah, I have those, and let me just go ahead and put that that graph back up, if you wouldn't mind. So here, obviously, we're nearing 4th of July here at the tail end. We're seeing very, very few cases. If we go back to, right around July 1st a year ago, that was a period that I kind of reflected as a little bit of a lull. We had a peak in April and May in terms of cases. Well, I got to go to the whole population. We had a little bit of a lull after the peaks in April and May, and then July started an upward trend again. So if we look here on July 1st, it looks like we were averaging close to maybe 150 cases in the city of Milwaukee as a 7-day average, and maybe about 50-ish cases in the suburban communities a year ago. So not inconsequential at all, and really does show where we were a year ago compared to where we are now. And if you remember, and if you look at this graph, we did see a pretty considerable spike after 4th of July weekend. Approximately 2 weeks later, we saw a pretty significant spike. That might have been due to people gathering in and around 4th of July. Hard to say for sure, but there was a noticeable spike about the middle of July last year. And then we went on a downward trend and then rose back up, in the fall with a peak in November.
Thank you. At this time, those are all of the questions I'm seeing in the chat. I'll give it just one more quick minute to see if anyone else has questions. Otherwise, we'll conclude our briefing early. Right, seeing as I am not receiving any additional questions, That will conclude our briefing. Have a safe long holiday weekend and go Bucks. Thank you.